This week on Forward.
Your average city council race, state rep race, mayoral, whatever it is 10 to 15% or even worse. And who are they? They're the far left, they're the far right, or they are special interests to know how to move money and votes in low turnout elections. And as a result, that chooses not only who wins office, but what they could do once they're in office. And once you're in office, you don't want to go back. You want to get reelected. You solve for the problem of how do I win my next primary? That means keep the base happy, keep those special interests happy. And the result is nothing can get done.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast philanthropist, venture capitalist, political innovator, and the author of the phenomenal new book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy, something that's on our minds right now. Bradley Tusk, welcome back, Bradley.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So we certainly need to unpack a little bit about what happened election night.
Yep.
And you and I have been in touch. We both kind of feared or expected, because people ask us all the time, like, hey, what's going to happen?
Yep.
And you and I are both like, it seems like Trump's going to win. And then maybe there was like a glimmer of hope/doubt down the stretch. I certainly talked myself into the fact that, maybe things would head another direction.
Same.
And then Trump ended up with a resounding win. And you think that it was a structural problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately the underlying problem is not that the Democrats had the wrong candidate. I think Kamala was a perfectly solid candidate, and they ran a pretty good campaign. Yes, you can always debate any one or two strategic decisions, but they lost by too much to think that any one or two changes would have really made a difference. Nor do I think that even if Biden a year and a half ago said, hey, I can't run for another term, and you had an open primary and someone else emerged, I don't think they likely would have won either, because I think the problem is structural, right? In that the world feels really bad right now. And it feels really bad for a few reasons. One, there are problems we're dealing with like always. But two, because of social media, in my view, it's the unhappiness machine where you go on there and two things happen immediately. First, you compare your real life to everyone else's fake lives, and their fake lives seem a lot better, so you feel inadequate. Second, you see everything happening that's bad everywhere in the world all at once, all of the time. So you feel bad about yourself. The world feels awful. And then in terms of existential risk, when you and I were kids, it was nuclear war, and that's probably even a greater risk today than it was back then. But now layer in bioweapons and climate and maybe AI, and the world feels scary and more dangerous than ever. When people run for office, and you and I have obviously done this together, so we know this, you promise to fix everything. That is literally how campaigns work. Things are bad, and if you elect me, things will be good. But the problem is that structurally, our government is so set up for failure. It is so polarized and so controlled by the extremes that it's almost impossible for any incumbent, especially in a period of 4 years, to really fix much of anything.
You
right?
mean they're not going to fix everything?
No, I mean, even like if you take the one really good thing Obama was able to do in the Affordable Care Act, now 15 years later, we're seeing the benefits of it. I think it was a very good law. But even then, it wasn't like healthcare was fixed overnight. And so everyone promises to solve the problems. The world feels terrible. No one can solve the problems. Everyone just points and screams at each other. And the public says, all right, let's try someone else. And I think we're going to be in a series for a while of one-term presidents, one-term governors, one-term mayors, party control bouncing back and forth in legislatures, because no one is in a position to fix the underlying problem. And until we make the structural reforms, it's always going to be this way.
This is a pretty convincing case. I was with Bill Maher a little while ago. We made a similar case. He said that we were going to play you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose, while other people were, while people get more and more fed up. Numbers bear this out. About 3/4 of Americans think we're on the wrong track. Bill also said there's one idea that people can consistently hold in their minds, and it's throw the bums out.
Yeah, exactly.
So whoever the bums are, and certainly, I did not vote for Trump. I voted for Kamala. I now wish Trump and the team well, because, you hope that they deliver on these changes. But one of the things that I was reflecting on was, can they actually solve the problems? Can they make life better for the, average working class American?
No, I mean, because ultimately the world feels like a hard place because it is, right? And so think about the issues where Trump succeeded. Immigration. So yes, I think he could do a much better job in border security. I think Biden did a horrible job in border security. But ultimately, if your solution is we're just going to shut everything down, that probably does even worse because we have an economy right now with giant gaps in hospitality and construction and nursing. And even worse, we have an aging population. So our Medicare and Social Security costs are going up and up and up. And the only way to fill the gap is to bring in millions of new legal immigrant who become taxpayers who can pay into the system to cover all the spiraling costs. So yes, I think Trump could shut down the border, but because we live in a world of such extremes, that also means shutting down immigration overall. So that doesn't help the economy. Inflation, right? Clearly an issue that hurt Biden, hurt Harris. Trump is now promising all of these tariffs, and whether it's 10% on everything or 60% on China, what is that going to mean? Everything costs 10 or 60% more, right? So definitionally, inflation's only going to go up. And so when the only way to win office is to have these sort of extreme positions and proposals, then, you really can't ultimately implement any of them in a way that solves the problem. And the sad thing is, it's not that Americans are so evenly divided, right? So take guns, right? 70 to 80% of us would say we should neither confiscate everyone's guns, nor should it be easy to walk into a store and walk out with an assault rifle. Problem is, 70 to 80% of us don't vote in primaries, and as a result, our views don't really matter. Immigration, 70 to 80% of us would say we should neither deport everyone here illegally, nor should we have open borders. And yet again, don't vote in primaries, don't matter. And so we live in a world where even though there are common sense solutions to most of our problems, because of gerrymandering, typically the only election that matters is the primary. And yes, the presidential election has plenty of turnout. We were probably at around 65% yesterday. But your average city council race, state rep race, mayoral, whatever it is 10 to 15% or even worse. And who are they? They're the far left, they're the far right, or they are special interests who know how to move money and votes in low turnout elections. And as a result, that chooses not only who wins office, but what they could do once they're in office. And once you're in office, you don't want to go back. You want to get reelected. That's human nature. And so what do? You solve for the problem of how do I win my next primary? That means keep the base happy, keep those special interests happy. And the result is nothing can get done.
Hello, YouTube. Please do hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget, you can ask questions at mailbag@andrewyang.com. See you on the interwebs. Well, you sound like a pro because you are a pro, but you're a highly unusual pro on so many levels. And that you actually looked at the system and said, you know what? I don't love it. Yep. Like, I understand it. I interact with it, but I don't love it. And you want to do something about it. And here's where it gets wild. Everyone, I want you to understand what Bradley's doing. So Bradley has laid out a vision for how to make it so that more of us can participate in our system to improve the incentives. Then he's written this really, really brilliant new book that I urge everyone to pick up. Vote with your phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. And then he actually funded the technology to make mobile voting possible and is now trying to implement it in communities around the country. So Brad, I mean, look, I love idea people, but you know who I love even more is like idea people who then actually roll up their sleeves and try and make it happen in real life. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. Look, so we've done a couple of things. So when I worked in government and politics, so the first chunk of my career was directly in government. As you know, I was Mike Bloomberg's campaign manager, who ran for mayor of New York. I worked for him at City Hall. I was the deputy governor of Illinois for 4 years, ran the state's budget operations. Another guy named Ron Blagojevich ran the whole state. A couple of years on the Hill as Chuck Schumer's communications director in the Senate. And so I've seen government at every angle and every perspective. And that's where I basically took away the notion that every policy output is the result of a political input. Every politician makes every decision solely based on re-election and nothing else. Are there exceptions? Sure. Mike Bloomberg was an exception. The reason that I tried to help you become mayor of New York City was because you were an exception, but there are exceptions. And so they're only going to change their actions if they're incentivized to do so in order to win their next primary. I then ran all the campaigns to help legalize Uber and ride sharing around the U.S. And the way that we won, because at the time we were a tiny little tech startup,
People
and taxi
forget,
was
but
a
yeah.
very muscular industry.
Yep.
But ultimately, through the app, we were able to mobilize our customers to tell their elected officials, whether it was city council members, mayors, state senators, whoever was relevant in that situation, hey, I like this thing, leave it alone. And millions of people did. We changed the underlying inputs, and that changed the outputs, meaning we won in every single jurisdiction in America.
So I want to unpack that for a second. So some people might not remember or be familiar, but what you did is you actually turned Uber customers into this incredible constituency that would then call or text elected officials, sometimes even show up to things, and say, hey, whatever you do, leave my Uber the F alone, because it's now necessary for my way of life. And then politicians said, wait a minute, what? Like, there are all these people that actually use this thing, care about this thing, like know who I am. Right. As a result, and then they got out of the way. And like you said before that, like the TLC commissions, like the local taxi was a real interest group.
Yeah, absolutely. Because look, all things being equal, until we started mobilizing our customers, you're a city council member in, I don't know, Tulsa, wherever you want to pick, and the taxi guys give you a couple of grand every campaign cycle. All things being equal, you do what they want because you want the money for your campaign. Then I just had 7,000 of your constituents tell you, hey, leave this thing alone. All of a sudden you're like, hey, that's a lot scarier to piss all those people off than it is to not get the $3,000 next time from the taxi guys. I'll do what my constituents want. And look, I think that's the good news about our system is because politicians are so focused on staying in office, they'll do whatever their constituents want. They're voting constituents. So if the voting constituents are only the far left or the far right, that's who they're going to represent. But if we can get turnout from 10% to even say 30%, so it's still like less than a third, we radically change it. Do you remember when Amazon wanted to put their second headquarters here in New York?
I do remember, Long Island City.
Right. So when you looked at the polling, the vast majority of the city wanted it to happen. The vast majority of the district wanted it to happen. AOC then comes out against it. And Mike Gineris, who's a state senator, who's just a guy, right? He's not inherently good or evil or right-wing or left-wing. He's just a politician, right? And he said to himself, well, I know that this would be good for my district, and I know that the majority of my constituents want it, but I also know that if I push the project through, I'm going to get a primary from the left, and I could lose that primary because historically turnout will probably be about 10%. And those are the most left-wing voters who love AOC and hate business and hate Amazon and hate tech. And he ultimately was faced with a choice: 40,000 new jobs for New Yorkers or one job, his own, and he picked himself. And you know what? I don't even blame him. That's how it works.
80% of maybe higher would have done the same thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think that at the same time, if turnout is primary, if he said, oh, it's going to be 35% and the majority of those people want this to happen, he would have pushed the deal through, not because he cared any more or less about jobs or his constituents or ideology, simply because he just wants to stay in office, right?
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast. You just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Imagining that politicians will do what's in their best interest or their self-interest is a pretty good heuristic. And you used these devices actually to activate all of those Uber users.
Right. So once we did that, what I started wondering as I was happy, I'm like, these same people who are advocating for us My gut is they don't know who their city councilman is. They're not voting in state Senate primaries. But because we gave them something to care about and we made it really, really easy, they acted. And so my question became, what if they could vote this way? So that's what led to the creation of the Mobile Voting Project. And the first thing we did was to test the underlying question of, if you create the supply, will the demand follow? And so we funded elections using the existing tech on the books in 7 different states. We either deployed military.
What year was this?
This was starting in 2018 and ran for a couple of years.
Wow.
We either deployed military or people with disabilities voted in real elections on their phones. And the answer was, yeah. Turns out that if you make it easier, more people will do it.
Wait, shocker. You mean if I can vote on my phone, I'm more likely to vote?
Amazing, right? In
I
fact,
know. What?
Denver did a poll of people who participated, and get this, 100% said, yeah, I really prefer pressing a button to going somewhere. Of course they did, right? So that answered the question for me of like, okay, more people will participate if we make it a lot easier, which is just the lesson of technology and mobile phones in general. And then that gets you to the next question was, okay, can you do it securely? And at least the cryptography community didn't feel like the tech that was on the market did so. And I felt like until there was something that was truly secure, it was never going to pass muster. And so like you said, we started building our own mobile voting tech. So let me walk you through how it works. So you're Andrew Yang, you're a voter in New York City. You go to the New York City Board of Elections app on the App Store, you download the app. The first thing they say is, okay, is Andrew really a voter here? You put in your information, yes. Next question is Andrew really Andrew, right? So the first thing is multi-factor authentication. So like if you forget your Google password, we send you a code, you enter into the app. Then we use biometric screening. So like clear at the airports to say, is Andrew really Andrew? In fact, I'm working with Eric Starr, our mutual friend, who I think you introduced me to, who runs UltraPass to do this technology. And we verify that you're you. It matches up your face against some sort of government ID. Then the ballot comes up on your screen. And the goal is to make it as simple and easy as possible. But because it is digital, some of the challenges that you get in the other forms of voting, undervoting, overvoting, stray pencil marks, hanging chads, none of that is an issue. And just to be clear, I'm not arguing that mobile voting should replace any form of voting. I just want to give people an additional option. So you fill out your ballot, you make your choices, you double check it, you triple check it. Once you're happy with it, you hit submit, and 2 things happen. First is your ballot is immediately encrypted. The second thing is you get a tracking code, like if it were a FedEx package, where you can follow the progress of your ballot throughout the process. It then goes back to the New York City Board of Elections, and the first thing they do is air gapping, which just means they take it offline. So now your ballot is no longer connected to the internet. They don't decrypt your ballot until it's removed from the internet. A paper copy then prints out immediately, which is then mixed in with all the other ballots. You can see how your ballot fared because you can know from the tracking code, it was received, it was tabulated, it was printed. And then because the underlying code itself is all open source, and we can go in and check it to see if anything went wrong, if anything was changed, anything else. So we'll finish this tech next year. We'll submit it to DEF CON for testing. We'll submit it to NIST for testing. But then most importantly, I'm going to make this free to every government in the world that wants to use it.
What?
Free of charge. So I've put $20 million of my own money into this project so far. And the reason why is, look, it had to be this way because unless the code was open source, experts would say you'll never know for sure whether the election was secure or not.
Wait, I want to stop here for just a second because I've been a huge proponent of voting on your phone for quite some time. And the counter argument is always like, it can't be done securely.
Yep.
And then let's say hypothetically you were to be like, I've got a stack of white papers and engineers that have said this is actually fully secure. You know what no one ever says?
What?
Like that's great. That's great. You solved that problem. Let me take a look at it. Because what you find is that people actually don't want everyone to be able to vote.
No,
you know what I mean?
Especially, look, when I talk to politicians and I say, wouldn't you like to not be hostage to the extremes? Wouldn't it be nice if you could reach across the aisle, work with your colleagues, compromise, reach consensus, and actually get some things done? They all say, yeah, that would be great. But then when you say, okay, that means we got to move your primary turnout from, say, 10% to 30%, they say, hold on a second here. I'm not sure if I want to take that kind of risk because who knows who those people are.
Because right now they are insulated from competition. Like they know what the voting universe is. Their consultant says, look, here's your win number. You can get to your win number by keeping a certain set of people and groups happy. And they're like, this is predictable. Then if you were to triple the electorate, I'd be like, whoa. I don't know who's voting. I don't know how to make them happy. my job security, or at least my certainty of the process goes down. And so even though theoretically I like the idea of more people voting so I can do the right thing, I get scared.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. And so my thought is this, which is, let's start small. Let's start in municipalities for school board elections, city council elections, maybe mayoral elections.
Interesting.
And I'm going to pick, we're in the process of the research now, 6 to 12 cities where we're going to run legislation next year that would allow mobile voting for municipal elections. And I think to the question of like hacking, I really just don't think Vladimir Putin is hacking the Queensborough president election. Right. And let's see how it goes. Let's learn from it.
Was that a real example, by the way? You call the Queensborough people up?
Yeah. I mean, they feel like, hey, no one cares more about Putin and more about anything than who gets to give out proclamations in Queens. But and then let's see what works. And then we can scale up to state primaries and then eventually federal. And this can be done over time. And the tech that we're building isn't meant to be the end all be all. It's a starting point. And then my hope would be that other people, including one day it's DARPA and the government itself, work with us and keep making this thing better and better. But we can start the process now, start making mobile voting available to people. And the reality is 70+% of our lives where government impacts it are determined at the state and local level, not at the federal level, right? That's really where most of the stuff happens. So even if you could get state and local primary turnout up from 10 to 30 and move things towards the middle and enable them to get things done, you would massively make our government more effective and better.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's EXPRESS VPN.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. Oh, yeah. Plus, it would demonstrate to people what's possible. I mean, the fact is we run our lives on our phones. And then when you talk to the legacy parties, they'd be like, oh, no, can't do that, can't do that. But if you're doing that in your local elections, they'd be like, guys, like it's actually happening. Like modernity has arrived.
Right. Right. And once I found this with Uber and lots of other startups since that's a venture capitalist that I've invested in. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As soon as people realize that, hey, there's actually nothing stopping us from voting on our phones.
So I got to get the genie out of the bottle. As I mentioned, this is totally a philanthropic thing. We have done it ourselves because to get to this point, I felt like A, I had the resources to do it.
Wow.
And B, it would move faster that way.
Yeah.
But now passing this in cities and states all over the country is a 10-year, hundreds of millions of dollar project. And I don't have that kind of money myself. And so I'll keep putting real money into this thing. But the reason that I wrote this book was to kick off phase 3 of the project, which is
phase 3,
building the movement, passing legislation, finding political partners, finding financial partners, raising money, and really building this into a massive campaign.
Year 6, you're going public, sort of, or public in the sense of
if one of my startups did that, I would never stand for it. I'd be like, you're 5 years too slow. But the nice thing about being the investor and the founder here is that I get to control the timeline.
I mean, the true spirit of philanthropy is so evident. I mean, 6 years, $20 million. And I want to share with you a vision. I'm not sure we've talked about, but we definitely should. So when people talk to me about third-party presidential candidate, I say to them, by the way, I said this to even No Labels, now more than 2 years ago. I said, look, if you were to run a third-party presidential candidate, and people ask me, to run all the time in various ways, and I said to them, it's like, look, I only want to do something if I'm going to be helpful and constructive. But what I said is, look, couple things. Number one, you have to go before the two major parties nominate candidates, because if you do it afterwards, then you're the spoiler. You do it beforehand, you're already there running.
Right.
And the second thing is that you want to have a primary where the American people can make their voice heard among you, Mark Cuban, RFK, Matthew McConaughey, whoever it is, so that you can say, oh, I like Yang, I like this person. And then we essentially submit ourselves to the voice of the American people, but you vote on your smartphone, where you could have millions of Americans saying, I like this candidate, I like that candidate, in an independent nomination process. California, you might actually have input on who the nominee is, because now you're just like a bystander, even though you're the biggest, most important state economically. And a political party can design its nomination process however it wants. People's like, oh, are you allowed? It's like, you're a political party. You can nominate your candidate however you deem fit. The legacy parties have decided that it's going to be Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, et cetera, which, by the way, it's like, why is that? No one knows really. Like,
some sort of ancient tradition.
I mean, at this point, it's not just strange tradition, but it's back to control.
Yeah.
It's like, why I want to limit the electorate in the process so I can put my thumb on the scale and like funnel it through.
Totally.
So if you were to open it up to the American people, you would use these. And then if you had millions of Americans who are voting in a primary process on their phones, the legacy party would be left saying, no, that's not real. What is real is waiting to hear what 7% of Iowans think in February, and then be like, wait a minute, no, that's not what's not real. You know what I mean? So
in some ways, it shows you the distinction yesterday between the betting markets and the polling, right? The polling said the race was a dead heat, or even had Harris up. The betting market said Trump was materially ahead. And while the polling seemed methodologically more sound, betting markets reflected a lot more people, right? A lot more inputs. And you know who turned out to be right? The betting market.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. What can you do that's going to make you happier, healthier, more energetic throughout the day? There's not much, but you know what really, really could make that kind of difference? Investing in a proper mattress. That's what I did with a Helix Sleep mattress. I took their personalized sleep quiz. I got a Dawn Firm mattress sent to my door. And not only has it made a difference in my health and energy, but it's also become my kids' favorite mattress, even though it wasn't ordered with them in mind. Maybe it's because they love me so much. No, it's actually because the mattress is better. And if you don't take my word for it, GQ, Wired, everyone agrees that Helix Sleep is the mattress pick if you want a better night's sleep. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. That's helixsleep.com/yang. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Yeah, I have been known to place bets, and the odds makers somehow they converge around what's going to happen. So I think your vision of us voting on our phone truly is one of our only ways out of this mess, because right now the two parties have things like very, very constricted in terms of the voting universe. Like, not many of us show up. And so if you go through the premises, would more people vote if they could vote on their smartphone? Everyone knows that the answer is yes.
Yes.
And so then if you have a bigger electorate, do the incentives improve so that people want to serve the general public interest as opposed to...
Yeah, again, not because they're any different or better, simply because this is what they need to do. And look, if you need any evidence of that, we still have school shootings. And the reason that we have them is if you are, in this case, and by the way, I'm an independent at this point, so I don't really love either party, but if you're a Republican and your district is gerrymandered and your primary has 12% turnout and NRA members are half that 12%, you know intellectually that it's crazy that we're letting people walk into stores, walk out with assault rifles, and then shoot up schools or churches or Walmarts or whatever it is. You also know that if you were to dare to say something, you'd be out,
You're out.
right? And
Pretty
so
much
they're not willing to risk. In fact, there's an example in the book of a Congressman, Chris Jacobs, who did say something and he lost his job immediately, right?
We have people in a system where you will lose your job if you try and do the right thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we ask, why isn't anyone trying to do the right thing?
So instead of sort of expecting people to be heroic, let's just accept that people are self-interested. That's fine. But let's align their self-interest with our policy and the public interest. And then you can start to get things done. And like, to be clear, I like all the different political reforms out there. So like you, I've worked on ranked choice voting. I've worked on open primaries. I've been in this for a long time. The reason I am so dedicated to mobile voting is, to me, it's the only scalable solution. I think all the other ideas are great in that they can moderate candidate behavior. They can push people towards the middle. But ultimately, when it comes to, like, say, ranked choice voting, I don't think anyone who wasn't going to show up to vote in a state Senate primary now does, because they can list 4 people instead of 1, right?
Yeah, no.
But
this would expand the voting universe.
If you look at the stats from Pew, 97% of American adults under the age of 50 have a smartphone. Even 76% of American adults over the age of 65 have a smartphone.
Yeah.
And all we're saying is not get rid of any form of voting, but have mail-in voting, have in-person voting, have mobile voting, and let's just get as many people participating as possible.
Wow, when you put it in that context, it's like have mail-in voting, have mobile voting. You can vote in person too if you're old school. So if someone wants to help make this vision a reality, the first thing they should do is get your book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. But some people who listen to this might even be like an elected official in a locality.
Yeah.
Like, how do people reach out?
The few things you can do. So one is you can just reach out to me directly. LinkedIn is usually the best way to do that. Or if you go on bradleytusk.com, you can do it through there. If you're an elected official, if you are
really, really
donor,
rich.
You're really rich, whatever it is, we'd love to talk to you. And if you're generally just interested in volunteering or getting involved or just learning more, if you go to votewithyourphone.org, we've got a whole website set up to help people get involved and to learn how to do more.
It's an incredible vision, but it's more than a vision. I mean, you've really put in a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into getting it to this point. And now it's about to hit cities around the country. Not even cities, maybe. It could be schools, could be school board. I'm even going to say, like, maybe even some colleges could use it for, like, student body president. I mean, whatever you guys want to do. But let's make mobile voting a standard, not the standard, but a standard. And it could set us free.
I think it could.
Bradley Tusk, man, I learned something new anytime I'm with you. But more than that, I admire your patriotism. When you said it's like at this point, like you're an independent, you are, man, you're a fucking patriot. I just appreciate the heck out of you.
I appreciate that. And look, my family came to this country after World War II. They were literally living in refugee camps. I never thought I'd make a bunch of money. And so I feel like I'm playing with house money at this point. And if I can use it to try to repay the country that took us in and gave us the chance to have a really good life, then that's what I want to do. And I'm been grateful that I've had the chance to do that.
Well, you're doing that and then some. Bradley Tusk, bradleytusk.com. Let's get behind this man and let's vote with our fucking phones.
Thank you.